Not surprisingly, the Hajj, the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, is saturated in paganism and idolatry. During the Hajj, Muslims walk circles around the Kaaba, the cubical shrine that they pray to. They kiss the black stone. They run back and forth between the hills of Safa and Marwa, and so on. Where did they get these practices? Before Muhammad conquered Mecca, the Kaaba was a center of pagan worship in Arabia. The Kaaba was surrounded by 360 pagan idols. Sahih al-Bukhari, 2478. Narrated Abdullah bin Masud. The Prophet entered Mecca, and at that time there were 360 idols around the Kaaba. He started stabbing the idols with a stick he had in his hand and reciting, "And say, truth, i.e. Islamic monotheism or this Koran or jihad against polytheists, has come, and batil, falsehood, i.e. Satan or polytheism, has vanished." This is when Muhammad took control of the Kaaba. But why would he want to take control of a pagan temple and make it the center of Islamic worship? Let's back up a bit. The Muslim scholar and Quran translator Yusuf Ali, in his commentary on the Quran, has an appendix on ancient forms of pagan worship. He writes, "It will be noticed that the sun and the moon and the 5 planets got identified each with a living deity, god or goddess, with characteristic qualities of its own. The ancients knew about the stars and constellations, but they also knew about 7 heavenly objects that seemed to have their own motions: the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. They didn't have telescopes yet, so they didn't know about the other planets. According to the pagans, each of these 7 heavenly objects was orbiting the earth, and each was associated with a particular pagan deity. Why did the pagans of Mecca circle the Kaaba 7 times? To honor and worship the 7 planetary deities that they believed were circling the earth. This is as pagan as you can possibly get, and now this thoroughly pagan practice is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. But let me guess, if it looks like paganism and walks like paganism and talks like paganism, it must be pure monotheism in disguise, right? When they visit the Kaaba, Muslims do their best to kiss the black stone. That's funny, the pagans of Arabia used to worship stones too. Sahih al-Bukhari, 4376. Narrated Abu Raja al-Utaridi. We used to worship stones, and when we found a better stone than the first one, we would throw the first stone and take the latter. But if we could not get a stone, then we would collect some earth, i.e. soil, and then bring a sheep, and milk that sheep over it, and perform the tawaf around it. When the month of Rajab came, we used to stop the military actions, calling this month the Iron Remover, because we used to remove and throw away the iron parts of every spear and arrow in the month of Rajab. What did the pagans worship? A stone. And they would trade that stone for a better stone to worship. When does that process stop? When you get to the best stone, the black stone at the Kaaba. That's what the pagans did. What do Muslims do when they get to the Kaaba? They kiss the black stone. It's as if Muslims are saying, we want to be as idolatrous as possible, but we're still not idolaters. Interestingly, even Muhammad's companions understood that kissing the black stone was idolatry, but they kept doing it anyway because Muhammad had done it. In Sahih al-Bukhari, 1597, we read, narrated Abbas bin Rabi'ah, Umar came near the black stone and kissed it and said, "No doubt I know that you are a stone and can neither harm anyone nor benefit anyone. Had I not seen Allah's messenger kissing you, I would not have kissed you." This is Umar, the second rightly guided caliph, saying that he knows he shouldn't be kissing a pagan idol like the black stone, but he does it anyway because Muhammad did it. But there's more idolatry during the Hajj. When the pagans took the pilgrimage to Mecca, they would run back and forth between the hills of Safa and Marwa. They ran back and forth between them to honor the pagan idols. How do we know that Hagar and Ismail were ever at these hills? Because Muhammad said it, right? We know that pagans used to run back and forth as part of their idol worship. And the early Muslims knew this as well. Sahih al-Bukhari, 3847. Narrated Ibn Abbas, to run along the valley between the 2 green pillars of As-Safa and Al-Marwa mountains was not sunnah, but the people in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance used to run along it and used to say, "We do not cross this rain stream except running in great haste." Now, this is devastating to Islam because Ibn Abbas says that this practice was just a pagan practice. It wasn't part of the Sunnah of Muhammad. Sahih al-Bukhari, 4496. Narrated Asim bin Sulaiman. I asked Anas bin Malik about as-Safa and al-Marwa. Anas replied, we used to consider going around them a custom of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. So when Islam came, we gave up going around them. Then Allah revealed, verily, as-Safa and al-Marwa, two mountains at Mecca, are of the symbols of Allah. So it is not a sin on him who performs Hajj or Umrah, pilgrimage, of the house, the Kaaba at Mecca. Here again, the early Muslims understood that this was a pagan practice. They said that they stopped doing it when they became Muslims. But Muhammad liked it, so it ended up in the Koran. How much paganism can you fit into one religion? Quite a bit, it seems. And two things are amazing here. First, it's amazing that Muslims who are swimming in a sea of pagan practices are deluded enough to think that they're the true champions of monotheism. They're doing everything the pagans did. They just rename it monotheism.
Let's look at Old Testament dates from a different angle. Genesis 16:16 describes how Abraham was 86 years old when Ishmael was born to his wife. Hagar bore Ishmael when Abraham was 86 years old. Now, pay attention, because in Genesis 21:5, Abraham is 100 years old when Isaac was born to him. Skip down to Genesis. In Genesis 21:8, Isaac grew and was weaned. Now, how many years does this put between Isaac and Ishmael? In one verse, we are told that Abraham was 86 when Ishmael was born to Hagar. In another verse, we're told that he was 100 when Isaac was born to Sarah. 100 minus 86, let's see, 10 minus the 6, carry the 9, 14, okay? Comes out to 14. Then we're told in Genesis 21:8 that Isaac was weaned. Tradition in the Middle East is that weaning takes 2 years. So now we have a 14-year difference between Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac has been weaned for 2 years, so that means Ishmael is now what? 14 plus 2? You got it, 16 years old. Fine, so far, if you don't look into it too deeply. But let's work on down to Genesis 21:14 through 19, which tells the story of Ishmael and his mother when they were allegedly cast out. Now remember, at this point, Ishmael cannot be less than 16 years old. The 14-year difference between when he was born and when Isaac was born, 2 more years for weaning, 16-year-old youth. And yet, what do we find in Genesis 21:14 through 19? Let me read it to you, and you pick out for me the passages which don't match the description of a 16-year-old. Quote, so Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water, and putting it on his shoulder, he gave it and the boy to Hagar. Okay, I'm cheating. I said you tell me, but I guess I'm going to underline with my voice. And sent her away. Then she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water in the skin was used up, and she placed the boy under one of the shrubs. Placing a 16-year-old boy under a shrub, and he stays there? Interesting. Then she went and sat down across from him at a distance of about a bowshot. For she said to herself, let me not see the death of, you got it, the boy. What is the situation here? They've run out of water in the desert. She has put Ishmael under a shrub and walked away from him because she does not want to, quote, see the death of the boy. Are we to believe that a 16-year-old Ishmael could not crawl out from underneath the shrub as if a mother could force a 16-year-old under a shrub in the first place, and he, for some reason, could not walk over to his mother and say, hey, Mom, what's going on? What are you doing? But this is what we're told to believe. So she lifted her voice and wept, quote, and God heard the voice of the lad, the boy. Then the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, what ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad. Where he is, arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in your hand. Now, skepticism begins to set in here. Here we have Hagar allegedly being told to lift up 16-year-old Ishmael and hold him with her hand. Quote, for I will make for him a great nation. Well, then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the, well, you can guess it, gave the lad a drink as if he was not capable of getting it for himself. An inconsistency? Most definitely. One that jumps out at you? One that jumps out at us? Well, when we're told about it. But not the kind of inconsistency that is easy to discover. However, once discovered, we've got to deal with it. How do you deal with an Old Testament that claims to be Scripture, and yet it describes a 16-year-old youth as being incapacitated? Remember, we are talking about a time and a nation where 16-year-old men were married and waiting for their second or third child. We're talking about a day and age where 16-year-olds were heads of households, and at times they were kings. And we're told that this 16-year-old, healthy youth was being treated like an incapacitated child.
The historical context for us. I'll just read what he said in the Battles of the Prophet. Allah Most High ordered the believers to prohibit the disbelievers from entering or coming near the sacred mosque, so non-Muslims were no longer allowed to take the pilgrimage to the Kaaba in Mecca.